We will now have a question and answer session with Dr. Meenakshi Gopinath. Mr. Bharat Doshi will be the moderator of the questions received. In view of the time constraint, the trustees of the foundation do apologize for not accommodating all the questions. We are happy to announce that today for the Q&A session, we have two distinguished gentlemen joining us live along with Mr. Bharat Doshi to interact with Dr. Meenakshi Gopinath. The two gentlemen are Dr. Rakesh Mohan. He is a renowned Indian economist. He has been the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank of India for many years. He delivered the 5th Lalit Doshi Memorial Lecture in 1999. Ambassador Vijay Nambiar, former Chief of Staff to the Secretary General of the United Nations. He is a trustee of the Lalit Doshi Memorial Foundation. Ambassador Nambiar delivered the 13th Lalit Doshi Memorial Lecture in 2007. And now, over to Mr. Bharat Doshi.
Thanks, Ruby. We have a panel here, and the panel will have its own questions. And I have on the screen before me several questions from the audience. So we are conscious of the time available. And Rakesh and Vijay, if you agree, we'll first start with one question from you, and then I will pick up one or two questions from the audience, and we'll cover the question answer session. So Rakesh, you want to start first?
Thank you very much, Bharat. And let me first congratulate you, Meenu, if I may. I can't really address you as Dr. Meenakshi Gopinath. It's too difficult to do that. But really, my warmest congratulations, heartfelt congratulations on a very thoughtful, wise, scholarly, and eloquent lecture. You have really given us a great deal to think about. And it'll take me some time to absorb it when I read your text. But I do have much to discuss with you on the role of higher education, which we will have to do offline over a long, long dinner. I will concentrate right now on just one broad issue. I was struck by the absence of emphasis on the function of higher education or university to engender scholarly and academic excellence and research, both among faculty and students. You have clearly, of course, with great justification, concentrated on the social function of the university in myriad of aspects, all well taken, whether it's to do with aspects of inclusion, whether it is to do with gender diversity, whether it's promotion of democracy, dissent, etc., all of which, of course, I agree with. But what strikes me, in a sense, is that the countries with the highest gross enrollment ratio in higher education, which you mentioned, are China and the United States, have also perhaps now the greatest universities in the world. In the case of the United States, earlier UK and Europe, Yale, Harvard. I mentioned Yale because that's where I got my BA, so I have to first mention Yale. Yale, Harvard, MIT, Stanford, etc. But now, increasingly, Peking University, Tsinghua University, Fudan, and others in China. Now, my question sort of is that one of the characteristics of great universities is that they're also elitist. They do, of course, strive to equalize access, which wasn't the case in earlier times, but they do emphasize excellence in the faculty, importance of research, etc., etc. One of the things you mentioned, of course, is the small average size of colleges in India. Of course, there are some universities that are huge, but with small colleges. And that's different from both China and the US, because you do need some reasonable size for quality, to get quality faculty, students, etc. So there's a need for both excellence, emphasis on scholarship, open research, free research, academic independence, etc., and of course, inclusion. And it seems to me that the two leading countries in the world, that is China and the US, seem to be doing that. But you completely sort of missed out on talking about scholarly excellence in India. I would say, of course, that one big change that has taken place last 20 years, which you mentioned, is a huge increase in quantity. But it doesn't seem there's been any increase in quality. I can just give as a one measure difference China and India, that since I was at Yale University the last 5 years or so, that the number of PhD students from United States, from China at Yale, and I presume on average in the US, is about 5 times the PhD students from India. Whereas there are an equal number as MBA students. And one of the other issues, which perhaps is not the time to go, is excessive privatization of higher education in India, much more than the United States, by the way. Your views, particularly on the scholarship and academic excellence issue.
Thank you, Rakesh. As usual, extremely provocative and a very important question. And of course, you've raised this issue of quality. It is a very vexed question. And when we look at quality, it remains a very elusive concept, especially in our context. Because can we look at the old question, can we look at quality in isolations of inclusion, but we leave that for our long conversation over dinner. But the new education policy has been very cognizant of this gap in what you call research. And they have recommended that given what is called the massification of higher education, that universities must be divided into 3 tiers. The top tier, which they call the world-class research and higher education university, which will concentrate precisely on sifting students who have this amazing propensity for research. We also have to put our policies of admission under the scanner, and we have to be a little more open to a needs-blind policy as exists, as you know, in Yale and Harvard, where your socioeconomic background doesn't come in the way of your aspiration. Now, the 3 tiers are as follows. The type 1 would be world-class research and higher quality universities. Type 2, high-quality teaching across disciplines and with some research. And type 3, high-quality teaching at the undergraduate program. Now, there are several debates around this, whether you can actually hierarchize the space in this way. It's a very open debate right now. It's being hotly debated. Can teaching happen without concomitant research? And I think you have pointed to that. There is also the other phenomenon of the dumbing down of research, and you are probably aware of what are known as the predator journals, where you can pretty much get a PhD if you're willing to pay the price, in terms of ready-made theses that you can actually buy. And in that too, there are gradations of purely authentic has a particular price tag, 50% plagiarized has a different price tag, and you'd be surprised. However, let me not go there. Yes, I perhaps should have addressed this issue, but I thought that I would choose some which are particularly resonated with me. The NEP, for example, has set up a whole array of bodies and programs, and you know, their acronyms are really quite amazing, to enhance the quality of research in India. You know, they've set up the Higher Education Grants Council, the Mission Nalanda Takshila, the National Higher Education Regulator Authority, National Repository for Education Data, national testing agencies. There's a whole, and there are several schemes to encourage research. But you know, you can have all the schemes in the world, but if at the level of the school, the interventions in terms of the quality of education are so woefully wanting, as the Asar report has said, you know, your colleague, Professor Kaushik Basu, has written very eloquently on this, that particular base to build a knowledge economy, if you wish to call it that, or to build research of value in higher education institutions, if that is shaky, what are the foundations that we can build from? You know, by the time young people come into the higher education space, there are already severe shortcomings in terms of their learning landscapes and their ability. You know what the Asar report said about learning outcomes in school. I don't have to go there. So we have a certain kind of, I hate to use the word raw material or human resource, if you call it that. And then the focus on putting the responsibility entirely to colleges and universities for suddenly conjuring up the rabbit out of the hat is somewhat, I think, unfair. However, your point is well taken. You cannot really compete. And I also feel that this obsession with becoming world-class universities is a little, I think, misplaced. We really need to build the base of knowledge. We need to encourage original thinking, not rote learning. We have to inculcate what is known as a scientific temper that our founding fathers talked about. And then look at excellence not as antithetical to inclusion, but as an integral part of that. I don't know if I've answered your question, but thank you for that comment. I will make sure that I read up more on this at our meeting offline. Thank you.
Vijay, can you ask your question?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, if I may, Dr. Gopinath or Meenu, for your very, very deeply reflective yet scintillating and sometimes even searing analysis of the Expansive Academy. And as has been said, it's covered more the university or the academy as social institution. Let me take you a little more into what may be a comfort zone for you, and that is your role in WISCOMP. WISCOMP has actually, in many ways, it's more than 20 years old. It started even before the Security Council Resolution 1325. It's in many ways anticipated much of the debate, international debate on women and security and conflict management. But I think after 20 years too, I suppose you still think it's a work in progress. It should be, considering what you've said in your entire entire lecture today. How is WISCOMP today negotiating what you call the daily plebiscite? How is it going in terms of the, of it working? Do you think that it's, because it's not just the subcontinent, I think we have a lot to do inside the country. And I wonder if you are actually, I can see that it has been happening, and you really talked about the report about in Kerala, etc. So I want you to reflect on this kind of the continuing, let's say, the role of WISCOMP in furthering this quiet revolution you talked about in Engendered Academy. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay. And thank you also for pointing out that we came into being a year before the 1325 resolution. And that was because I think in the South Asian region, unbeknownst or unreflected in the global discourse, there were already movements led by women to establish transversal solidarities around issues of peace, conflict, and security. In other words, they were already doing the WPS agenda, even though it was not labeled as such. And today, that discourse has tended to invisibilize the contribution of South Asian women, as you well know. And thank you for mentioning the workshops that we did. You were a very important part of that. You had, I remember the scintillating discussions that you had, especially on the composite dialogue and so on. Now, women's voices were truly marginalized in the discussions on peace and security, in the formal discussions on peace and security, because by and large, they entered peace building through the corridors of human security. As Mehboob Haq said, human security is a child that did not die, a dissident who was not silenced, a disease that did not break out into a pandemic and so on. So it also involved, therefore, turning the vocabulary on security on its head, wresting it out of its realist moorings on security as a zero-sum game. And you would remember that thanks to you, I was part of some track 2 dialogues between us and our neighbors. And I was struck by the fact that even though they were track 2 processes, we were thinking war and speaking peace. That basically we were mirroring the positions of our security establishments on nationalist agendas, jingoistic sometimes, and defending some of even the worst excesses against democratic values in our own countries. Now, therefore, there was a need to speak, as Carol Gilligan said, in a different voice, and to look at the everyday mutinies and the daily resistances, the subaltern concerns that not just women but men face in what is known as situations of peacetime war, a kind of continuum of conflict that exists. And in the land of Gandhi and Buddha, you know, that is a very high level of ambivalence to violence. And it's something that has become so normalized today. So yes, building cohorts of young people and women, I do want to say we make it a policy to have at least a 33% reservation of men in all our initiatives. And that is why we are engendering the security discourse and not ghettoizing it. We don't believe that men make war and women make peace, or that women are from Venus and men are from Mars. We don't want to reductivize that whole discourse. But yes, to look at the different layers of violence that exist within societies, across social groupings, and to also examine how young people can be deeply invested in believing in the cultures of coexistence. It's a fragile link, it's a difficult proposition today across the world, not just in the South Asian region. We are seeing shrill representations of new kinds of xenophobia, new kinds of demonizations of social groups. So as you said, the battle for freedom is never completely won, and the field is never quiet. It will always remain a work in progress. But important is to recognize that this new language, this new vocabulary has to emerge from the new generation of people, because their reality is very different. The globe they inhabit is very different. Borders and boundaries mean different things to them. Of course, there are new borders and boundaries of the mind, the monocultures of the mind that are coming in, the monotheism of consciousness that threatens our global village. But can the old methods of recognizing context specificity, the interconnectedness of roles and functions, can it again inform our systems of meaning. You know, our systems are our ideas of time and space, which is so unique to what you call South Asia. So yes, it is a work in progress, and thank you very much indeed. And the encouragement of people like you who sat in the formal policy space at a time when it was not fashionable to speak about gender, peace and security really meant a great deal and gave us fillip. And today, rather than being invited to the last panel at any seminar on peace and security, I think we've inched up to the pre-lunch sessions. So that's saying a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may, if I may come back to Professor Rakesh Mohan's question, you know, I just did want to mention that there are several initiatives that are being taken at the level of the new dispensation under NEP. And, you know, there are several aphorisms which will surprise you. You know, one is called imprint, which is called impacting research, innovation, and technology. The other is impress, impactful policy research and social technology. Then there is STAR, scheme for transformation and advancing research. Then there is SPARK, scheme for academic research and collaboration. And then there is GYAN, global initiative for academic networks. Then there is STRIDE, I'm sorry, it goes on and on, scheme for transdisciplinary research for India as a developing economy. And I think this would be, and then there's, last but not least, I spoke about the ethics of care, but this is in a different context of research. There is CARE, Consortium for Academic Resilience and Ethics. So there you are. There is a whole menu of initiatives. But so long as quality poses huge problems at the level of school, learners will always come hampered without the tools for research.
Menu but no university.
I'm sorry?
I said menu but no university.
Menu?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, both the panel members, and it was brilliant, Meenakshi ji. My personal thanks I will convey separately, but I must apologize to the audience. Your questions, I'm going to make it as a email to Dr. Meenakshi Gopinath, and I will come back to the people who have asked questions, which are on the computer here right next to me. We will now have to, I will now have to hand over the baton back to Ruby Powry. Just wanted to thank Ruby before she passes on for vote of thanks, that she is the head of the Department of Psychology at the Xavier's College, but her association with the Lalit Doshi Foundation has been there for more than 20 years. Ruby, you take over.